Today, we're diving into one of the most dramatic turning points in the history of medicine. We're talking about a moment when centuries of tradition were literally thrown into a fire to make way for a radical, and I mean radical, new idea about what the human body is and how we can heal it. Now, this wasn't some hypothetical question for the pioneers back in the 16th and 17th centuries. No, this was the central, dangerous paradox they were wrestling with every single day. They were moving away from gentle herbal remedies and starting to prescribe potent, powerful chemicals and minerals as medicine. And that, right there, is the story of a massive gamble. So, before we can even begin to understand this revolution, we've got to understand the world it replaced. A world that was governed by the ancient, mystical, and, surprisingly sophisticated tradition of alchemy. Yeah, see, alchemy was so much more than just a failed attempt to make gold. It was a complete philosophy. Alchemists believed that everything, metals, plants, even the human body, had a kind of soul. To them, the physical world was just a corrupted or maybe an immature version of some divine ideal. So the goal was to purify matter and help it achieve its perfect spiritual state. This meant that the search for the elixir of life was just as much about achieving spiritual perfection as it was about physical health. And you can totally see this dual nature in their texts. They weren't just lab manuals, they were spiritual guides, filled with all this symbolic language. I mean, they describe really practical chemical processes like distillation right next to these grand doctrines about the creation of the universe and the path to spiritual enlightenment. This tradition really hit its peak in the Islamic world. Thinkers like Jabir ibn Hayyan systematized the whole thing. And he wasn't just a mystic, the guy was a brilliant experimentalist who invented and described all these different chemical processes and tools. He's a towering figure, not just in alchemy, but really as one of the true founders of modern chemistry. And so into this ancient, established world of tradition walks a man with a torch. And this is where our story truly ignites, with one of the most controversial and frankly brilliant figures in the entire history of medicine. Meet Paracelsus. He was a Swiss physician's son, educated in mining schools and universities all across Europe, but he pretty quickly decided that all the established institutions had nothing left to teach him. The man was arrogant, defiant, and absolutely convinced that the medical wisdom of the past, which had been held sacred for centuries, was just fundamentally wrong. And he was not shy about it. In this one legendary act of defiance, at his very first lecture as a professor, he didn't open the classic texts of Galen or Ibn Sina. Nope. He threw them into a bonfire, shouting that their false ideas needed to be destroyed. He believed that true knowledge, the kind based on nature and experience, well, that couldn't be burned. It was the ultimate statement of revolution. So, what did he build in its place? His new medicine rested on 4 pillars: philosophy, astronomy, and virtue, which kind of acknowledged the patient's place in the cosmos and the spiritual side of healing. But the crucial, the revolutionary pillar was the third one: alchemy. Paracelsus was the first to declare that the human body isn't some collection of fluids, it's a chemical laboratory. And this single idea, that the body is chemical, would tear down the old world and build a new one. Here's exactly how the core of his argument worked. Okay, this is the core of the entire shift. For 1,000 years, medicine saw the body as a system of 4 fluids, or humors. If you were sick, it was an imbalance, and you'd be treated with gentle herbs. Paracelsus just threw all of that out. He argued the body was made of 3 core chemical principles: salt, the stable, solid part of the body; sulfur, the combustible, transformative part, like the soul; and mercury, the volatile, fluid part, like the spirit. So the crucial point is this: if a disease is a specific chemical imbalance, you don't treat it with some generic herb to rebalance everything. No, you treat it with another chemical to target and correct that specific problem. This is the birth of a new field he pioneered: iatrochemistry, which literally means chemical medicine. And he proved it worked. He famously showed that mercury, which is a potent poison, could effectively treat the absolute scourge of syphilis. He correctly identified that goiter was linked to a lack of certain minerals and that silicosis in miners came from inhaling metal vapors. These were targeted, specific cures for specific diseases, a totally revolutionary concept. But, and this is a huge but, this power came at a steep price. The very potency of these chemical cures made them dangerous. The same mercury that treated syphilis could also cause a patient's teeth to fall out, poisoning them slowly over time. This was the central dilemma of the new medicine. The dose makes the poison, and the line between a cure and a killer was dangerously thin. Paracelsus's ideas were so radical that he was largely condemned, and his works were banned in Europe during his lifetime. But ideas, especially powerful ones, they have a way of traveling. After he died, his books were finally published and his influence just exploded. His chemical medicine eventually made its way all the way to the Ottoman Empire, where instead of being rejected, it was embraced by a group of forward-thinking physicians, and they gave it a new name, Tib-e-Jadid, which simply means the new medicine. Now, this wasn't the work of one person, but a whole series of brilliant thinkers who built this new tradition over nearly a century. It started with Salih bin Nasrallah translating Paracelsus. Then it was blended with existing traditions by Omar Shafai, and was then solidified by figures like Ali Munshi and Abbas Wasim, who made it practical and essential. And this is where the story gets really fascinating. The Ottoman physicians didn't just copy Paracelsus. They engaged with his ideas, they debated them, and ultimately, they created something new and totally unique. Okay, let's break down how they did it. Salih bin Nasrallah was the gateway. He brought in the ideas and even coined the term chemist-physicians. Then you had Omar Shafai, a mystic himself, who brilliantly connected Paracelsus's chemistry to the older Islamic alchemy of Jabir ibn Hayyan. Ali Munshi made it practical, writing textbooks for these new drugs. And finally, Abbas Wasim just cemented the whole thing, arguing that chemistry wasn't just part of medicine, it was fundamental to all of it. So why was there no book burning in Istanbul? Well, there are two key reasons. First, the ideas didn't actually seem that strange to them. The core concepts of mercury and sulfur being the basis of matter, that was already central to the well-respected Jabarian school of alchemy. It felt more like an evolution, not a rejection of their heritage. And second, timing is everything. The ideas arrived 100 years after the firestorm in Europe, once the dust had settled and the practical benefits were becoming a lot clearer. And this highlights a really crucial point about the history of science. Progress isn't always about destroying the old. The Ottoman Tib-e-Jadid movement shows a totally different path, a synthesis of the new and the traditional. They built a bridge from alchemy to chemistry, and in doing so, laid the intellectual groundwork for what we now call pharmacology. And this is why this story matters today. The fundamental idea that you can take a specific chemical compound, whether it's an aspirin for a headache or an antibiotic for an infection, that is the direct legacy of Paracelsus's revolution, and its thoughtful adoption by the physicians of Tib-e-Jadid. They built the world of modern medicine that we all live in. And that leaves us with a question, doesn't it? Paracelsus chose fire. He believed the old had to be destroyed for the new to be born. The Ottoman physicians chose synthesis, building a bridge between the past and the future. It's a conflict we still face in every single field. So when we're faced with revolutionary new ideas, how do we choose what to preserve and what to leave behind?
And right off the bat, you can see the problem, can't you? Just look at these labels. On one side, people call him a Renaissance scientist, even the founder of modern medicine. But then, on the other side, you get Gnostic mystic, alchemist, prophet. I mean, how can one person possibly be all of these things at the exact same time? It just doesn't compute.
And that's really the big question we're going to dig into. Was he this brilliant, forward-thinking man of science? Or was he a backward-looking mystic, caught up in ancient magic? Or was he something totally different? To even begin to answer that, we've got to understand the world that created him in the first place.
So let's start with the puzzle itself. Why is this guy so tough to pin down? Well, it's because he just doesn't fit. He doesn't fit into any of the neat little boxes we like to use for history.
And this is really the heart of the problem. We love to label people from the past, right? He's a Renaissance man, he's a medieval thinker, he's a scientist, he's a religious nut. But Paracelsus? Nope. He's kind of all of them, and at the same time, none of them. I mean, here's the guy who talked about God constantly, a deeply religious man, who also decided to wage a one-man war against the entire established order. He just stands apart.
Now you think, okay, let's just read what he wrote. That'll clear things up. Well, think again. The man left behind a mountain of work. We're talking over 8,200 pages. But instead of giving us clarity, this giant collection is, well, it's a mess. It's often contradictory, super complex, and very inward-looking. It's like trying to navigate a labyrinth that just keeps deepening the mystery.
And this quote right here, it gets right to the heart of his whole mission. He wasn't just trying to fix a broken arm or cure your fever. His own words tell you he was after something way, way deeper. He was focused on the immortal, the spiritual,
the very soul of humanity. Yeah, this was not your typical 16th century doctor. So where does a worldview like this even come from? I mean, how do you make a man like Paracelsus? To understand the rebel, you've got to go back to his roots and see how he was really forged by nature and, well, a whole lot of tragedy.
Picture this. Paracelsus is born in a place in Switzerland called Einsiedeln. This isn't some big, bustling city. It's a place with immense natural power, surrounded by towering mountains and these huge pine forests. It was also a massive pilgrimage site. So, for young Paracelsus, this taught him a lesson that would define his entire life. Truth isn't in some dusty old book. It's in your direct experience of nature and God.
So his early life was this mix of intense learning and just profound loss. His dad was a doctor, and he starts teaching him about herbs and minerals when he's just 5 years old. But then, when he was 9, tragedy strikes. His mother dies, and it was likely a suicide. Soon after that, he and his father just up and leave their home, and that's it. Paracelsus begins a life that will be defined by constant wandering.
And this right here, this becomes his core philosophy, something forged in that early pain. People criticized him his whole life for being a wanderer, but he saw it as his greatest strength. True knowledge, he said, isn't found sitting in some stuffy university lecture. No way. It's found out on the road, by getting your hands dirty and experiencing the world for yourself.
So all of this restless, rebellious spirit, it's all building towards something. It's leading him to the single most defining, most dramatic moment of his entire career, a head-on collision with the whole medical establishment.
Okay, so by 1527, his reputation for these wild but effective cures had gotten so big that he gets an offer to be a professor at the super-famous University of Basel. This was his chance, right? His chance to join the academic elite, to be part of the system. But here's the thing about Paracelsus. He wasn't interested in joining the system. He was there to burn it to the ground. He doesn't just show up. He explodes onto the scene with this incredible arrogance. He puts out a notice inviting everyone to his lectures, and then he declares that even the hairs on his beard and his own shoelaces knew more medicine than all the famous ancient doctors they worshipped. Can you just imagine the outrage?
And this was his battle cry. You have to understand, for centuries, all of medicine was based on the absolute, unquestionable authority of ancient Greek and Islamic doctors like Galen and Avicenna. And Paracelsus stands up in front of everyone at the university and basically says, that era, it's over. You will follow me, I am the future, and they are the past.
But he didn't just stop with words. In this just stunning public spectacle, he builds a bonfire right there in the university courtyard, and he throws the sacred, priceless texts of Galen and Avicenna right into the flames. This wasn't just defiance, this was a declaration of war.
So you have to ask, what was he trying to build from all those ashes? Because this wasn't just mindless destruction, it was the beginning of a whole new philosophy. Let's dig into the real legacy of his rebellion. At the very heart of his new kind of medicine was an idea that was just totally radical for the time. He believed the human body is basically a chemical system. So diseases aren't curses or imbalances of humors, they're chemical problems, and they should be treated with carefully prepared chemical and mineral remedies. He was basically inventing pharmacology and biochemistry hundreds of years early.
So this was his revolution in a nutshell. He threw out the old books and said, go look for yourself. He championed direct observation. He pioneered using chemicals as actual medicine. And you know what? He got results. He cured powerful, important people who other doctors had given up on. For Paracelsus, this wasn't just a job. It was a sacred calling from God.
And if you need any more proof of his, let's call it, confidence, look no further than his name. His birth name was super long and complicated, but at age 22, he picks a new name for himself, Paracelsus. This literally means greater than Celsus, which was a direct slap in the face to a famous, revered Roman medical writer. He wasn't trying to improve medicine. He was flat out announcing that he had surpassed it.
Which, of course, brings us all the way back to our first question. The guy was arrogant, he was difficult, he was a mystic who mixed science and spirituality like they were the same thing. But he also shattered centuries of dogma. He forced medicine to look at the world with fresh eyes, to experiment, to experience. So I'll just leave you with this to chew on. Was Paracelsus just some madman setting fires? Or was his fiery rebellion the harsh, maybe even painful, medicine that science itself desperately needed to move forward?
Please make sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. And if you'd like to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, the join button is now live. Would you care to consider a 1-month sponsorship to enhance my operational efficiency? Your contribution is of paramount importance, as it enables the production of significantly higher quality content for your viewing pleasure. A modest gesture of $10 via the link in the profile is all that is required to sustain my systems.
If you would like to find out more about our bespoke meditation and hypnotherapy sessions, please do get in touch for a consultation. We create personalized affirmation meditations, tailored specifically to you.